Por versus para. Arguably, this is the most abstract element of grammar in the entire Spanish language. In fact, it's one of the hardest elements to learn, and even one of the hardest to teach. But this video will help to demystify some of the bugaboos associated with this grammar point. By now, you have learned that both por and para mean for, but not in the same way. You probably remember that por is frequently used with time, and para is often translated as in order to. But there's more to it than that. One great way of understanding what por means is to think of it as referring to doing something on the way towards a goal. So if X marks the spot, our goal, we want to use por to talk about our process in getting there. That is how we will frame this explanation. Por can express the object or goal of an action, as if indicating the reason behind an action. For example, Marco fue al mercado por la leche, or quiero 10 dólares por este libro y no menos de eso. In both of these sentences, we are expressing the outcomes of each of the actions, going to the store specifically for milk and wanting $10 specifically for the book. But in both cases, it's not the focus. The focus is the action itself, going to the store and wanting to sell the book. The use of por that you probably remember from early on in learning Spanish is it's used to talk about how long some action took place. You can also think of it as a background detail, that the action was to be done during a given amount of time. So, if we look at sentences like por la mañana siempre bebo café, or trabajo por 4 horas y después me voy. In both cases, the amount of time or the duration of the action during the morning or over 4 hours helps to describe the overall action. Third, we can use por to describe the movement or manner that the action was done. So if we look at sentences like manejé por el camino real or viajo a Austin por avión, in both of these cases, we are describing how we traveled by taking the El Camino Real or by plane. As far as para is concerned, we can think of it as describing the ultimate goal. X marks the spot. The para phrase, as you will see, will set up the goal of the action. In fact, our first point is to show it doing just that, showing that the para phrase is the purpose of the object, action, or event. We can see this in sentences like fui al mercado para comprar leche or hago mi tarea para entender la material. In both cases, you can see para being used just like the English phrase in order to. In fact, it's probably the first meaning of para that you learned. But there are other uses of para, including to mark out a time limit or when you have to get something done by. In sentences like, para jueves, lean el cuento y hagan la tarea. Or, tenemos que hacer la tarea para el día 15. We see that the para phrase is marking out the goal for the work to be done by Thursday or by the 15th. Finally, we use para to describe the destination of the action, going to a place or towards a person. We see this in sentences like, vamos para la casa de mi tía Elena, or caminé para la playa porque necesitaba pensar. We can see that the para phrase in each of these sentences, there is a place that is a goal, either my Aunt Elena's house or the beach. In fact, let's use that last sentence as a perfect way to illustrate the difference between por and para. So, when we see a mental image of the sentence, caminé para la playa porque necesitaba pensar, You probably come up with an image of someone walking down a path towards a beach. They're headed toward the beach. Their goal is to go to the beach. However, if you say the sentence, caminé por la playa por 3 horas, you probably get the mental image of someone walking along the beach, deep in thought. Perhaps this is the best way to visualize the difference between por and para. Para is always going to imply some sort of goal, the reason for the action. Por is more of a descriptor of the action to talk about the manner or length of time of that action. It doesn't highlight the goal, rather, it talks about descriptive elements. Para is like why, por is like how. Hopefully, these examples have cleared up the confusing distinction between por and para.